In this video, I'm going to show you how to edit a panorama, and we're going to start off in Lightroom and then move into Photoshop. So first off, you need to go ahead and import all of your photos for your panorama into Lightroom. And if you don't remember how to do that, go back to the previous weeks where we looked at that and remind yourself how to go ahead and import. So once you have your images imported, you are going to be able to see them right down here. And if you have a bunch of images in this folder, like let's say I had all of my New York photos in here, you would first want to start off by selecting all of these images that you're going to be using for your panorama. You're going to see why this is important in just a moment. So I'm going to click on the first one. You can see it's highlighted. I'm going to hold down Shift and click on the last one. Now all 12 of these images are highlighted and selected. Now for your assignment, you are only required to do 5. If you did more than 5, that is completely fine. Okay, so now I'm going to go into the Develop tab, and I'm going to pick the photo that has the widest contrast to edit. And this is important because we want to do the most extreme edits on the photo that has the widest contrast, and then we're going to apply those exact same edits to all of the photos. It's important to keep the edits the same so that when you stitch them together in Photoshop, they don't look funky. Like, you don't want one to be a lot brighter than another. So for this, I believe I chose this photo right here. And how I know this is because I'm looking at my history panel. I did all of these different edits to this, and then I ended up synchronizing them, and you can see right here on this photo it says synchronize settings. So here's the photo I actually did all of my stuff to, my original edits, and I really just kept it into the basic panel. We don't want to do anything extreme quite yet. We're going to leave that for Photoshop. We're just prepping your files to stitch in Photoshop. So some things I did was, move some white balance, the exposure, shadows, clarity, and this is going to be totally up to you and what your photos look like. So let me reset this real quick so you can see what it looked like before. And then I went ahead and did my edits. So if I come back over here, you can see it says reset settings in my history. And I can come back down here even to when it first imported, and that's the same because that's the reset. Then I changed the exposure and made it a bit brighter. I did a custom white balance. I played with the white balance a little bit more, and even a little bit more. I brightened my shadows, added some clarity, and next I removed chromatic aberration and enabled my lens profile and set my lens profiles. Now let me show you how I did this. If you come right over here to lens corrections, you can go ahead and click on these here. And when you click on here, if you remember that chromatic aberration, we did some work on this in Photoshop, but we also have the option to do it in Lightroom. So let's click on that, and this is just something I do for pretty much all of my photos because, especially with the lens I was using for this, there's almost always a chromatic aberration happening. Then I also clicked on Enable Profile Corrections. If you're shooting in RAW, that information is already going to pop up here and automatically come up. If you shot your photos in their JPEG, this information might not be here. You might be able to look and find, let's say you shot with an iPhone, and you can go through and select what kind of iPhone you chose, and it will change things for you according to what Lightroom knows are issues with that lens, if there's a distortion or if there's vignetting or whatever it is. So I'm going to go back to where my original profile was. Let's see, that's me messing with it. Okay, so this is when I brought my raw file. It knew already that I was shooting with a Nikon. It knew that I was shooting with my 70 to 200 millimeter lens. And this is the profile it has given. So it has taken care of some of the issues. It's just a smart thing to do to make sure that if there are any bulging or vignetting, this takes care of it right away. All right, so now that you've done your initial edits, And you should still have all of your images selected. You can see they're all selected right here. Now I can click on sync, and it would actually sync up and copy all of my edits over to these photos. I've already done this, but for you, you'll just click on sync, and this will come up here. And you can just go ahead and click on check all and hit synchronize. Now make sure that you haven't done any cropping or anything like that. We don't want to worry about that kind of stuff yet. And if you, later on when you're doing the assignment, if you want to come back, you can actually click on these photos and they'll become larger so you can see some of these details I've added. In this case, editing with the basic panel, and then making sure you're clicking on enable profile corrections, and then clicking on sync with all of them selected. So just an FYI if you need to come back and look at this a little bit larger without going through the whole video again. And once again, that synchronize box came up, click check all, and then hit synchronize. All right, so now that we have our initial edits done, the files are now prepped to go into Photoshop. So let's right click on any of the thumbnails of your photos. And you'll see that there is this edit in, and you have multiple options. We have edit in Photoshop that'll open them up all individually, but what we want to do is merge to Panorama in Photoshop. This is going to open up Photoshop, open up that merge dialog box that we worked on a few weeks ago, and get us ready to start merging our photos into one nice big file. So you'll see that it's opened up, and if you look back here, this is actually, ignore that photo for a while, that's my finished file. But we have all of the files here now. So go ahead and leave it on auto, and make sure that blend images together is checked. It probably already is. Once you're done with that, go ahead and click OK. All right, now you need to really just sit back and let Photoshop do its magic. This may take a while, especially if you have quite a few images. Like you saw earlier, this was, 12 different photos, so this might take a minute. Now, some general tips is if you start doing this and it seems like it's taking forever, look at the other applications you have open and close down anything that you can. Another tip is that because these files are so large, you don't want to lose the hard work you're doing, so make sure you're saving often. Okay, so here is my stitched file. And what's interesting is that today when I did this, it actually did a better job than the last time I tried doing this. The last time I tried doing this, this whole area was kind of drooping down, and I had to do quite a bit of work to try to get it all straight again. Now you can see over here we have all of our layers, and they have layer masks, and you can see the different parts that have been used by the stitching software. So you can see that if I turn this on and off, that these parts were used and some parts were used on this photo. It is kind of interesting how it goes about. Now, knowing this, if there was an issue, let's say that there was an area that maybe wasn't straight right over here, like happened last time. This is this layer right over here. I know how my layer is here. I know how layer masks work. So if this wasn't quite right, I could move it around and then play with the layer masks to try to blend them together. You might have to play with the layer masks on this layer along with this layer, but in this case it turned out pretty good. So if you do have an issue, you might just want to try to run photo merge one more time, going back to Lightroom, going back to your selected photos, and doing edit in and merge to Panorama in Photoshop. And after 2 or 3 times of trying that, if they're still having the same issues, it might just be something you have to end up correcting in Photoshop instead. Like I said, playing with the layers and the layer masks. In this case though, this looks great, so I don't need to play with any of my layers or layer masks. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and flatten all of these into one layer. So I'm going to come over here, select this first layer, hold down Shift, and click on the last layer. Then I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go to Merge Layers. And now this is all down to one layer that we can start working on. At this point, it's a good time to go ahead and save. So I'm going to go ahead and go to File and Save As. And I'm going to save this as Redondo. So specifically Brooklyn Bridge Pano and underscore working. Okay, I've got it as a Photoshop file, and I'm going to go ahead and click Save. So now that I have this saved, the first big question we're going to ask ourselves is, do we want to crop these edges, or do we want to try content aware? So if you want to try using content aware, you can come right over here and go to your magic wand tool and click in a blank area. You can see it selected this entire area going all the way around. And before we fill this with content aware, we want to go ahead and expand the selection. If you remember, right now the selection is right on the edge. And so we want to overlap it just a little bit so it blends in a little bit better. So let's go ahead and come over here to Select, Modify, Expand. And you can do anything from about 5 to 10 pixels, usually works well. Okay, so now at this point we can go up to Edit, Fill, and under Contents, go ahead and make sure that Content Aware is selected. Click OK, and let Photoshop do its work. Alright, let me zoom out a bit and let's see how they did. Actually did not too shabby of a job. Let me come over here to, it looks like the sky is looking pretty good. Let's look over here. Now it does look like I have a little bit of a repeating area with this guy and this guy, so that's something if I wanted to keep, I would need to take care of. It looks like we also have some repeating benches. So in that case, it could be something like using the clone stamp tool. Let's take a look right over here. Let's see down here with the fence. Oh, it actually did a pretty amazing job with the fence area. Nice. Water all looks good so far. Okay, the pole looks really nice. This would usually be a continuation of this crack in the cement or whatever it is, so that's something that we would want to take care of. And it looks like there's some issues right over here too. So again, the more complex areas of an image, it's going to have a harder time. And the parts that aren't as complex, like the sky, it's going to be a little easier and a lot better looking. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Command D to deselect. And there's a couple different things we can do here. We could try using, like I said, some clone stamping tools and such to try to get this looking just right. I could try to take a part of this building and copy it for this building, taking some of this sidewalk and covering this up. So that is really up to you if you want to go ahead and do that. For me, just for the purposes of this assignment and getting to this video, I'm going to go ahead with my other option, and I'm just going to crop out those edges. I really like how what it did with these areas down here at the top, but those edges aren't that great. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my crop tool by hitting C. I'm going to zoom in a bit. I'm going to use my hand tool, holding it down my space bar to switch to my hand tool quickly. And I'm going to pull this in right about there. And then I'm going to come over here and pull this side in. About right there, I think looks good. And oh, it looks like it did miss a little bit there too. So let's go ahead. I'm going to hit my check mark and don't know why it missed there, but let's go ahead and take care of that. I'm going to click here with my magic wand tool. I'm going to come up here to select, modify, expand. Let's just do 3 pixels. It's a pretty small area. Then I'm going to go to edit fill, or you can hit shift delete to bring it up. Making sure content aware is selected for contents. Click OK. And it's taken care of. Let's see, Command D to deselect. There's a couple little issues right there. So now, you know what? I'm just going to use my stamp tool to just fix this real quick. I'm going to hold down Option and click where I want it to copy from. Click once, and then brush, and then brush. Okay, looking good. So this would be the point where you want to edit anything that you would like. If you like to make some parts brighter or darker. I mean, now that we've gone through pretty much all of the chapters, we still have one to get through, but that's dealing with video. But when it comes to editing and such, we've gone through all the chapters in your book. So flip through those pages and get some inspiration and think, what can I do to this photo? What can I do to make it truly my vision? Now, I also want to point out, I don't know if any of you guys noticed, but when I stitched this image together, I had actually used some JPEGs that I had saved of my raw files in order to make this part a little bit faster and to show you the difference in JPEG and raw processing. So this is what it looked like when I stitched together JPEGs. So JPEGs the files are already compressed down and there's less color in there. Now I'm going to switch over to the exact same panorama I did, but this other one was stitching it together with raw photos. So let's go to that, and you can already tell what a huge difference there is. I'm going to go ahead and go to Window and go to Arrange. And I want to do 2 up horizontal so I can see them both at the same time. And you can really see what a difference it made when I stitched the raw photos together. This is what, the raw photos are in a 16-bit color space. There's a way more colors available in there, a lot more data available for your photos. And it really looks, I mean, in comparison, quite a bit more amazing. I just wanted you guys to see a side-by-side comparison of what processing the JPEG file in the exact same way as processing a raw file will look like in terms of color. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what I did with my file that I processed that was all in raw. So let me go back up here to Window. I'm going to come back to Arrange and consolidate all to tabs. Okay. And let me go ahead and make this full screen for a moment. So for this photo, I did want to do a few edits. It looks like I added a levels adjustment layer, probably to make it brighter all the way through. Okay. I added a color fill layer, then masked out the areas around so it's only hitting the water, and used blend diff so it's only hitting the lightest areas. And if you remember from, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, when you guys did the montage assignment where you're using those blend diff sliders, it's exactly what I did. So if I double click on this right here, we can see that for the underlying layer, I did not want this white layer of color to hit the darkest area of the waters. That's why these are pulled over to the grays. So I'm going to pull this back over here so you can kind of see. So if it was all hitting that area, then everything's going to look white, and that's not what I want it to look like. Instead, I'm pulling this over here and moving this around so to tell it where I want it to actually hit the water or not. And you can also play with the different types of blend modes. I chose screen for this, and the opacity of it. All right. I also added a vibrance layer to the entire thing, a vibrance adjustment layer. And so that vibrance adjustment layer is right up here. So that really just brought out all of the colors a bit more in this photo. Okay, so for your assignment, I want you to follow the steps. I want you to go ahead and do some of the, do some edits. I want you to do at least 3 things that you learned from the book on your photo, at least. And please, put them on separate layers so I can see what you did. And really quick, I want to give you a preview. Next week, we're going to be looking at some more special effects. And one of them is going to be how to add neon glows to shapes and such. And so I did that with this photo. I was looking at this photo, and these people over here, they're over here, taking photos. And I started thinking, wouldn't it be cool if there was like neon markers or something to kind of tell you about what was around the city, or maybe direct people to great places to take photos. For example, I think I've pointed out before, but this is the Statue of Liberty way back here. So first I started by adding a compass in the water, and I did this by adding a custom shape. So there's all kinds of shapes that you can use in here, and there's even more that you can actually download and such, and there's a bunch in here, but these shapes are really fun. I'm not going to go through the exact process I did for all this to make this to make this video shorter, but this is just a preview of some of the stuff that you'll be able to do in the following weeks. So I added the compass. Oh, that was just something I was playing with, adding all of these like neon looking rectangles everywhere. So that's kind of fun. I did add this heart. So this is the one building that replaced the 2 towers that were destroyed on 9/11. So I added this heart over it and these little plus and minus signs, just kind of playing around. I created this little icon of the Statue of Liberty and added this here, so it's like telling people, hey, that's where the Statue of Liberty is. Oh, what was this? Oh, this is kind of like that idea of if someone walked over to this part of the bridge, it'd be like, hey, stand here and take a photo there. And here's another one. And I also added this New York City sign, which took quite a bit of time. If I open up this folder, there is the actual sign, and then there was creating all of these, all of the bars that are holding up this quote-unquote sign. And that was just really using like a line tool and then adding some embossing effects to make it look like it was 3-dimensional. Let's see how it looks with all this. That's a bit too much with that. But either or is fun. So, just a preview on one of the special effects you'll be learning about next week. You don't have to do this for this assignment, all this neon stuff. Just like I said, a quick preview. Alright guys, so have fun with your assignment and don't stress. Just, stitch it together, get it in Lightroom, stitch it together, put it in Photoshop, do your edits. Remember, I want to see at least 3 different edits that you've done. When you're done with your image, go ahead and open up the history panel, make sure your layers panel is open, take your screenshot to turn in for the assignment. You're also going to be sharing these in your discussion board, so make sure you save it. Make sure you save your PSD. So now that I've saved my working file, I'm going to get this file ready to post online. So first off, I'm going to change the color profile. I'm going to come up here to Edit, Convert to Profile. If you remember from our color space lecture, we want to be saving an sRGB for online. If it's not selected there, just go ahead and click on there and find where it says sRGB and click OK. Now, as it's converting this, it might take a moment, and if you remember, it's actually going to flatten all of these layers over here. So give it a moment to do its work. All right, all done. Now next we want to resize it for web. I'm going to come over here to image, image size. And if you remember for web, for the resolution, we usually want 72 to 96. I usually like doing 100 just for easy math, so I'm going to put in 100. And for the width, if I'm going to be viewing this on a large screen, which I'll be viewing yours on a large screen, let's go ahead and put in 30 inches. And you can see it's automatically changed the height to be 6.321 inches. That looks good, so let's hit OK. Okay, now this might look tiny, but right now we're viewing this at 8.33% if we look down here in the corner. So if I hit Command plus a couple times to take it to 100%, you can see what it's going to look like at 100% viewing. Looking pretty good still. Okay, so now let's come up here to File, Save As, and I want to make sure my name is on this, and I'm going to add Canvas because I'm going to be turning this in on Canvas, and I'm going to change this to JPEG. Then I'm going to hit Save. Go ahead and leave the quality at 12 and click OK. Alright, so now I have my file ready to turn in for Canvas. I'm going to go ahead and come here to File, Close, and when I close, it's asking me if I want to save the Photoshop document. I don't want to save my Photoshop document like this because it's not going to have my layers, it's not going to have my ProPhoto color space or my full resolution. So in this case, I'm going to hit Don't Save because remember, I already saved my working file. All right, and that's it, all ready to turn into Canvas.